Okay, YouTube, what is up? And in today's video, I'm going to be explaining how to use and what are functions. So let's start off by explaining what a function is. A function, well, it's hard to explain, but a function is basically lines of code that can be run over and over and over with different arguments. That is a horrible definition, and it should never be put in a dictionary, but basically, I'll explain it. It's sort of hard to understand at first, but yeah, so first off, I already created a function right here, but I'll recreate that. Or actually, I'll explain this. Um, so first of all, to create a function, you have to type in function, and then your function name. I named it tutorial. And then you have to have these two brackets, and then you press enter, and then it creates the end. That's basically how you create a function right there. How you call a function is by typing in the name, and then two brackets, and then it calls the function. So if we just type in print, this is a tutorial or something like that, whatever, and then we press play, it'll print, this is a tutorial. I think I spelled that wrong, I don't really care. There, see, it said this is a tutorial, and if we don't call it, then it won't print that because we have to call it. As you can see, it didn't. Now, there are multiple, you can improve upon this function and add in arguments. An argument is basically a variable that can go through this. So, if we type in number 1 and then number 2, number 1 comma number 2, this will be two arguments that are passed in here. Now, if we just call this right now, those arguments would be nil. So if we tried print number 1 plus number 2 or something like that, it would just, there'd be an error because they're all nil. Now, if we put in numbers, we could do something like 6 and 4, and then that would be 10. I think I explained that a little bit weird, but basically, the arguments can be changed every single time you run it, so you'll get a different number every single time you run this if you want to. So I'll just create a little while loop real quick and show you what I mean. Okay, so basically this will print, this will run the function every 1 second, and we'll get two different arguments passed into it every single time. Now if we run the script, it'll run it, well, of course, every 1 second, and you'll see the output down here. So we're getting 9, 7. This is basically the two random numbers it's giving us, and then plus themselves. The highest we can get right now is 20, but I don't think we're going to get that. Basically, that's how arguments can be passed in and everything. Now, there's multiple types of functions. They're all really the same, but they can be called differently. So this is the basic function and how to use it. But let's just say that if we wanted to have something called, like, a table, I'm not sure if you know what a table is, but we can just create a table by that, and then we can have a function inside of a table. So if we do this, so we have our table here, and then inside the table, we have our function. So we can just go, actually, 1 second, let me check this. Okay, so what we can do is tutorial equals function, and then basically the same function that we have here, only now instead of calling table, no, instead of calling the name, we're gonna call table.tutorial, and then the thingy, the function and the arguments. Now this is basically gonna print the exact same thing. That's just the basics of having a table and a function in the same thing. This works extremely well with a this works extremely well with a module script. I'm not sure if you guys know how to use those or anything like that. Let me quickly type out a module script. Okay, there we go. So now the function is in a whole entire different script, as you can see here. But since it's in that module and we required it, we can now just call mod.tutorial, which is basically like calling the table.tutorial. And if we run the script, it's all of a sudden starting to print this. Now, if you're scripting, you can't really have the client and the server communicate with each other perfectly because, a player can easily hack the client. So a way that people do a lot of things is by using remote functions and remote events. I'll make another tutorial on like remote events and remote functions later. I'll just quickly show you how we can use these. So these are basically event triggered functions. I hardly use event triggered functions besides remote functions. But yeah, because they're somewhat different. But basically, I'll just quickly throw in game dot. Well, actually, I'll just skip this part and show you when I have the script done. Okay, what's up, YouTube? So I just finished writing the script, and there's multiple ways of calling the on-server invoke for a remote function. I'll show that in a minute. But basically, I wrote function game.replicated_storage.remote function, and then on-server invoke. Then we'll get the arguments. You'll always have a player argument whenever you're invoking from the client. So we have this. We're not going to use it right now. And then we have our two arguments that we put in there by ourselves. And with a remote function, you can always return a value. So it's good for getting numbers and everything and stuff like that. And so we're returning the value of 1 plus 2, or 10 plus 10 because we're putting in that. And then we're just calling it on the client right here. So basically, if we run this code every 0.1 seconds, it should say that it should print 20. Yes, it is. And so it's doing that. Because the client is asking the server what this is, what 10 plus 10 is, and then it's returning this value and printing this value because we turned this into a variable. So that's one way of using remote functions. You can also do like something along the lines of function tutorial and then... Okay, so you can also do it like this, where you go right here and then you call it to tutorial function. But I personally don't like that as much. I like just having it straight up like this. And then also whenever you have a remote function, it's good to, return a value. Even if you're not returning anything, you just type in return. But always make sure to return something. I never invoke the client. But anyways, that's basically all the things that I wanted to cover, but you can also do something like, so you have the game.players.playerAdded connect function. You can also do something like, so you have that. You can also do something like this, and then you can do tutorial, and then type in function tutorial, and then just run that, and then you can have the player. Then you can just print player. And then that basically just will, whenever the player's added is called, it will call the tutorial function. With that player, it's basically like calling the first thing I wrote out. As you can see, it printed DoomedPerson right here. So basically, it's the same thing as having that right there. Then you can do that with any other Roblox function, I believe. I know that was a horrible tutorial. That was my first tutorial. Oh well. I completely messed it up and everything. Hopefully it doesn't sound that bad. I'll pull some editing magic or whatever. I don't know. Anyways, that's gonna be it for the video. And yeah, that's basically functions in a nutshell. And yeah, well, I'll see you guys in my next tutorial. Peace out.